Hey, my name is Cedric from Vertex Marketing Agency, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use one Google Tag Manager server container to track multiple different domains. So if ever you own a lot of different domains and you want to be able to do things like sending data to the Facebook conversion API or maybe Google Analytics 4, but via server-side tracking, all while using only one server-side container inside Google Tag Manager, well, you're going to want to watch this video. So a lot of companies reach out to me and say, Cedric, I have this domain called abc.com and we're currently doing server-side tracking and we have our server container created and everything, but we also own abc.uk and we would like to set up our server-side tracking for that domain as well, but we want to set up things in a first-party context, all while using that same server container. And there's lots of different reasons to use that same server container. One of them is to save on cost, since you can keep using that same Google Cloud project, obviously same server container, meaning that you wouldn't really need to create a new project and start a whole new subscription, which at that point you would kind of just like double your cost. So you can save money, and it's also another way to keep things a little bit more organized. So that's definitely something that I hear all the time, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in this video. But just an FYI, this is also going to work, let's say, if you own a fully different company. So let's say, you know, you're an entrepreneur and you own, let's say, 2 or 3 different companies, and you just want to use that same server container. Although those domains and websites are not related at all, it's still definitely doable with the technique that I'm going to be showing you in this video. Okay, so I am now inside my Google Tag Manager web container that I've created just for this demo, and I've called it abc.com. Now, one thing that I want to say is that this video is not for you if you don't have a working server-side setup. So let's say that your domain is abc.com. You need right now to be able to send your event, let's say your add to cart or purchase event, to the server container, and at that point you're sending it to the Facebook conversion API or maybe Google Analytics 4, but again via the server side. You need to have that set up inside your Google Tag Manager account. If you don't, then I've actually made other videos showing you exactly how to do that. So I've made one about how to send it to the Facebook conversion API, also made one about how to do Google Analytics 4, but server-side tracking. So go ahead and watch this video. They're gonna be in the description of this video. And then once you have, I guess, a foundation established, then, you know, I recommend that you come back here and you watch this video, because then I'm gonna show you how you can do the same sort of setup, but with another domain, all while using that same server container that you created, instead of having to like create a new Google Cloud project and having to basically pay the same price but for 2 different domains. Instead, you can kind of like join them inside the same server container, right? So hopefully that makes sense, but definitely really important that you have at least one setup working. If not, you're probably just gonna get lost and you won't really understand what I'm doing. So with that being said, what we want to do now is we actually just want to create our tag. And like I said, I'm starting from scratch, and what I did in this video is I created a web container and I called it abc.com, and I create another web container and I called it abc.uk. Usually the companies I work with, when they've already have like a website for, you know, Canada or US and then UK, they'll have different like web container for like these different countries. You don't need to have that. Like if you have, let's say, all your different domains inside the same Google Tag Manager account, it's still gonna work. But I just created the demo this way because usually most companies that I work with, that's the way their setup looks like. Another thing to keep in mind is for this demo, I'm gonna pretend like you have a different measurement ID for both like UK or .com. So your measurement ID and what you're tracking inside Google Analytics 4 is separate for those 2 different countries, and then potentially the same thing for your Facebook pixel. So you might have a different pixel for UK and then a different pixel for United States. Again, most companies that I work with, that's the way it's set up. But if your setup doesn't look like that, no worries. Later on, when we're in the server container, I'm going to show you what you need to do if ever you're using or basically sharing the same pixel and measurement ID across all different domains. So if that's you, no problem. I'm going to show you what needs to be done. All right, so let me start with the .uk, I guess, and then I can create a new tag. Again, I'm starting from scratch, so I need to create my GA4 configuration tag. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just putting a random number here, and this, I'm just gonna name it GA4 basic, and send to server container. Really important. If not, it's not gonna send anything. And this is where I'm gonna put in my custom subdomain. So I haven't talked about that yet. So for now, I'm just gonna put SS for server side, and it's abc .uk. That's the demo domain that I have, and I'm gonna leave that as is right now, and then later I'm gonna show you how to create those custom subdomain and how to like add them also inside your server container. So just follow along for now, and it's all gonna make sense soon. So here, this is where you want to add a new field. And this field, you could actually name it anything. In this demo, I'm going to call it identify source. And basically what we're doing is we're going to set up a value here, and it's going to be .uk. Again, this can be anything. Basically, all I want you to do is create a new field. You could name this, I don't know, source or identify or whatever it is. And then we want to set a static value. So the value here, the reason I said .uk is because this later on, we create basically a trigger inside our server container. And whenever there's an event data that's called identify_source with a value of .uk, then that's how I'm gonna be able to create my trigger and identify that that's this domain here. So that means I should send the tag to that measurement ID and not the measurement ID for the .com. So hopefully that makes sense. Here, I'm just gonna add a trigger and set that up for all pages. Save that here. And let's say I'm sending also a purchase event. I would want to do the same thing. So GA4 basic, I'm just going to call purchase. By the way, the basic, that's just like the configuration tab that I just created. Event name. So really important that you do the same thing for all your events. So for all your events that you're sending to your server container, you want to make sure that this parameter name is there. So identify source, and again, it's .uk. And I'm just gonna add it, give it a trigger, and let's just say page view, page URL contains thank you. Again, this is a demo, I'm just creating this real quick, but usually most thank you page have this as a rule. So I think that's a pretty good trigger just for this demo. So let's say save that, and I'm gonna name this GA4 purchase, and now I can save this. So for this demo, I'm just going to create 2 events, but obviously you probably have more than 2, but you would want to do the same thing for all your events. So just add that new parameter name and then save that. So I'm going to go to the .com now, and basically at this point, I'm going to be doing the same thing. So I'm going to open this up, and GA4 configuration, I'm going to just put a different measurement ID here, then send to server container. This is where you're gonna wanna do the same thing here, but you wanna add your new subdomain. So the subdomain for the .com. So it would potentially be ssabc.com. I don't know if you remember, the other one was ss.abc.uk. So really important that you don't use the same server container URL for both domains. You could technically use a Google subdomain, but because you want to keep things in a first party context, abc.com and abc.uk are 2 different domains. Although it's pretty much the same if ever you're looking at it, or if every user is looking at the domain, but in terms of Google and ad blockers and everything, they see that as 2 different domains, which that's true. So I recommend that you create a new subdomain for all your domains. And right now I'm just doing this for abc.com and abc.uk, but let's say you were doing this for, I don't know, 8 to 10 different websites. Well, you're gonna want to do the same thing for all your different websites. So always try to keep things in the first party context. That's just a general rule. Now, same thing here. So identify source, and for this one, we can say .com, and then I'm gonna give it a trigger, all pages. And I think that you guys are starting to get it, but I'm still gonna create the GA4 event just to make sure there's no confusion. So GA4 purchase, identify website, and then this one is .com. Now in this example, it's an e-com store probably, and we basically have a really similar structure for both stores. Really, probably the main difference is just the domain. So that's why I'm kind of setting up the same purchase event. But let's say again, you had 2 different businesses on 2 different Google Tag Manager web container. Don't think that the event needs to match from one web container to the other. Like I could change this to, I don't know, lead event, or it really doesn't matter. What matters is that you always update the server URL to the domain that matches the domain that this GTM is installed on, and then this event parameter here. That's the other important thing. So let me just go ahead, and here we go. We have a purchase trigger already made, so let's save that. So that's pretty much it for now in terms of the web container. I could actually probably go ahead and submit that because I don't think I'm actually going to be making any other changes inside the web container. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go inside the server container. I'm going to show you how you can create 2 different custom subdomain inside a Google Cloud project, how to link both of these subdomains inside your server container, and then how to create those different rules and triggers to fire some tags if some conditions are true. So that's the fun part. So yeah, let's get into the server container now. So navigating now to my server container. So that's actually another one that I created for this demo. And I usually like to access my Google Cloud project by clicking the little GTM code here. Then it's going to open this up, and then here, Google Cloud Platform Project ID, there's a little icon, and when I click that, it brings me to my project directly. A lot of people will just go and type console.cloud.google.com, but then the issue with that is if ever you've had other projects created in the past, you might actually end up in the wrong project. And I see lots of people messaging me and emailing me saying, hey, this is not working, when they're actually just working in the wrong project. So a quick little hack to make sure that you get to the proper destination. But once you're here, you're going to want to click on the hamburger menu, and if you see App Engine right here, you're going to want to go to settings. If ever it's not there, you can always just search it in a search bar here. Again, it's called App Engine, and I'm just going to go to the settings here. Now you're going to see something like this, and here where it says custom domain, this is where you're going to want to add your domain. Now, as I mentioned, in order to kind of like watch or follow along this video, you need to have the foundation. So you probably already have your custom subdomain here. And let's say, I don't know, it was ss.abc.com. Now you want to add ss.abc.uk, right? Or whatever is the new domain that you want to add. So I'm just going to go through the process just in case you forgot, but add a new custom domain. You're going to select your domain here. Here, I can maybe select my agency's domain. Now this is where you're going to select your subdomain. So I'm just going to do SS6 because if I just put SS, I believe I already have a custom subdomain called SS as my agency domain. So just like this, you want to have your subdomain, no HTTPS or anything like that. And then I'm going to hit enter, save mappings. Now it's going to look to see if this actually is available. So if ever you, I don't know, for whatever reason, I already had the SS6, then it's obviously going to decline it, but looks good. We have a little green check mark here, so I can hit continue. Now, those are the records that I need to add inside my DNS provider. So I'm using Cloudflare. So I would go inside my Cloudflare account and create an error record, and that would be the value. And then the name or the host would be SS6, right? So don't put it as like your root domain. So you want to make sure that you have your subdomain as your name or host. I know this is a little bit confusing here because when you look at that, they actually don't mention the name of the host. So a lot of people go inside the DNS provider and add the records and just set it as, you know, an A record and here's the value, and then they actually don't put the host or the name. And then when you don't put anything, it actually like sometimes will default to the root, which is your actual domain. So then you could potentially be overriding your website, which will crash your website. So really important that you set up the host or the name. And again, in this example for me here, it would be SS6. So once you've done that, you can just hit done and perfect. So now you're gonna have that custom subdomain. All you have to do is wait usually 24 to 48 hours and it's gonna work. Once you've added that new subdomain, you're gonna go back inside your server container, click on admin. Here under container settings, you want to add that new URL here. So if you set this up for your primary domain, you probably already see it here. So for example, here I should see abc.com. And now I would need to add abc.uk. And then I can save this. Once I've done that, I can go inside my workspace, and this is brand new. So by default, I get the Universal Analytics client and I get the GA4 client. So this is pretty simple. So I can actually just leave this as is. If ever you were proxying Google Tag Manager, and if you have no clue what proxying is, then don't worry about it. But if ever you are proxying Google Tag Manager, you obviously need to check this, and you probably had your other measurement ID here, but then you would need to add your new measurement ID. So if ever your company uses different measurement ID for those different domains, you want to make sure they have those two measurement ID. Again, if you were proxying Google Tag Manager. And I guess just a little short explanation, proxying Google Tag Manager means when you install the basic GTM code on your website, the code that you get inside your web container, you actually can remove the source where it's linking to Google's server or Google's domain and actually add your own custom subdomain. And this is what technically proxying Google Tag Manager is. But again, if you have no clue what I'm talking about, then don't worry about this. You can actually just uncheck this, and I'm just gonna save that, and then we can actually just create our tags. So, or before we create our tag, let's create our triggers together. So I'm gonna go to trigger, and I'm gonna create a new trigger, and it's gonna be a custom trigger, and it's when the client name equals GA4, and I'll explain all of that in just a minute. But when the client name equals GA4, and also we need to create a new variable, and it's when the event data, and we're gonna set the key path, which is identify source in this example, and I'm gonna call this identify source. Just make sure there's no spelling mistakes. So identify source, and I can save this. And it's when identify source equals, let's say, .com, then I'm gonna say that's my .com trigger. And now I can save that. And then what I can do is I can open this up, hit this, copy it, and now I can say .uk trigger. And here I can just change that to .uk. So let me explain this. So right now we have a client. So my trigger here looks, hey, whenever there's a GA4 client that claims a request, perfect. So if I go to my triggers, so that condition needs to be true. So when the client equals GA4, but then go ahead and look at the request that was sent. There should actually be a parameter here, and that parameter should equals to .com. If all these conditions are true, that's the trigger we're gonna be using to send, let's say in this example, the event to Google Analytics 4, but for that measurement ID that is coming from my .com, and also send it to, let's say, the Facebook conversion API to the specific pixel for the .com domain, right? So hopefully it's starting to make sense. And then we're doing the same thing for the .uk. So instead of .com, it's .uk. Now I can actually go ahead and create my tag. So I'm gonna open up this and I'm gonna create my GA4 event. Obviously at this point, I would wanna add my same GA4 property. In this example, I'm going to pretend that's the one for my .com, and then the event name, we're going to create a variable here. So it's just going to pull whatever the event name that the client receives, and the trigger. So I'm going to say that this one is for the .com, and I'm going to say GA4.com. So I know that this one is for the .com. Obviously you can name it better, guys. Again, this is just demo, but now I can save this. And let me just copy this, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the .uk. So obviously, then at this point, I would put my .uk GA4 measurement ID. So I'm going to change this a little bit. And same thing here, the event name. Let's not forget to change our trigger. So we want to use a .uk trigger. And then at that point, I could just save it. And then if I wanted to, I could also send different data to the Facebook conversion API. So if I go to template and I hit search gallery, there should be a Facebook conversion API template. Yeah, this one is actually from Facebook. So I'm going to download that one. Let's hit add, and then it would really be the same thing. So now I can just add my Facebook conversion API. I add my pixel ID here, my API access token that I get inside Events Manager for that pixel, because again, in this example, I have two different pixels. One pixel is for the .com website, and another pixel is for the .uk website. So if ever you only have one pixel for both domains, then you actually don't really need to worry too much about the different triggers. It doesn't matter which one gets fired, because you always send the data to the same endpoint. So at that point, let's say I use the same Facebook pixel for my two domains. I could just create a custom event here, and it would be when the client name equals GA4, because at this point, I don't need to know if ever it's from the .com or .uk, because it doesn't matter. We're always sending it to the same place. So as long as a GA4 client claims a request, just send it to the Facebook conversion API. But most likely, this is not the way you've set this up. So this is what you would need to do if ever you only have one Facebook pixel. And then the same sort of logic would apply for GA4. So if ever you only have one measurement ID for your both domains, then all you have to do is use that same trigger that I've created right now for the Facebook conversion API. But most likely you are using two different measurement ID or two different pixel, and the same sort of logic also applies if you're doing this for Snapchat or for Pinterest tracking. You wouldn't want to create a trigger just like what I did here, and we're looking at the client name when it equals GA4, and then the identify source is .com. So guys, hopefully this makes sense. So just to recap kind of what I've done with the setup is I have two different GTM web container, one for the .com example, and the other one is for the .uk. Now, both of these web containers have their own custom subdomain, and I've shown you how to go inside your Google Cloud project to create that, and also how to go inside your server container to add those two custom subdomain. And what we did is inside inside the web container, we created an event parameter called identify source. And depending on the GTM container, if it's a .com or .uk, we set different values, right? It was .com or .uk. And then what we did is we create a trigger inside our server container. And when there's a client called GA4 that claims a request, and there's a identify underscore source that equals .com, so that means that it is our .com website that is sending a server event, and we should send that to the appropriate pixel and also the appropriate GA4 measurement ID. And then the same thing applies for the .uk. One last thing I want to say is if ever you do have some questions, you can actually go to this website called coffeeandmarketing.org and you can ask all your questions there. You can go ahead and create your profile. It's completely free, and you can just simply ask your question, and either me or someone else on my team will get back to you. And that is a free resource for anyone here that has questions. The YouTube comment section is another great place to ask your questions, but sometimes you need to share screenshots or share videos so that we can really understand the issue that you're experiencing. And that's exactly why we've created this platform. But guys, that is it for this video. Bye for now.